Have you ever wondered if a single moment could rewrite your entire future? I was just a woman with a vacuum and a uniform, living paycheck to paycheck, until I reached behind a loose baseboard in room 412. What I found inside that wall didn't just change my life, it put a target on my back. Stick around because you won't believe how far someone will go to protect a secret worth millions. Before we dive into this journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, I'd love to know, what do you do for a living? And have you ever stumbled across something strange or unexplainable while on the clock? Let me know in the comments. Part 1. The Loose Board in Room 412. The hum of the industrial vacuum cleaner was the only soundtrack to my life. My name is Maya, and at 25, I had mastered the art of being invisible. To the guests of the Grand Crestview Hotel, I was just a blur of beige scrubs and a cart full of fresh lemons. I'm a woman of mixed heritage. My skin is the color of cafe au lait, and my hair is usually pinned back in a tight, professional bun that belies the exhaustion I feel every single day. Working in a high-end hotel in the city sounds glamorous to some, but to me, it was a cycle of scrubbing marble floors and bleaching away the evidence of lives much more exciting than my own. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the air feels heavy and the fluorescent lights in the service corridors seem a little too bright. I was assigned to the fourth floor, which was usually quiet. Room 412 was a standard suite, recently vacated by a man who had stayed for 3 weeks but barely left a footprint. No room service orders, no extra towels, just a "do not disturb" sign that had become a permanent fixture on his door handle until checkout. As I moved the heavy dresser to get to the dust bunnies that collect like secrets in the corners, I heard a dull thud. It wasn't the sound of wood hitting carpet, it was the sound of something hollow. I knelt down, my knees popping, a gift from 3 years of this labor, and noticed that the decorative wooden baseboard near the floor heater wasn't sitting flush against the drywall. Curiosity is a luxury I usually don't have time for, but something about the gap felt intentional. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, and gave the board a gentle tug. It didn't just move, it slid out with a mechanical smoothness that suggested it had been modified. Behind it wasn't insulation or wiring. It was a cavity, hand-carved into the framing of the building. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Inside the dark space sat a small, weather-beaten leather satchel and a heavy, metallic box with a digital keypad glowing faintly blue. I pulled the satchel out first. Inside was a hand-drawn map on high-quality vellum marked with coordinates that didn't look like they belonged to any city grid I recognized. There was also a small black notebook. I sat back on my heels, the vacuum still roaring in the middle of the room, forgotten. I flipped through the notebook. It wasn't filled with names or phone numbers, it was filled with strings of numbers, dates perhaps, or financial ledgers, and a single 6-digit code written on the very last page, 142209. I looked at the metallic box. It was a high-grade portable safe. I entered the code, 142209. The electronic lock chirped, the lid clicked open. I expected jewelry, maybe documents. Instead, I saw stacks of high-denomination bills bound in clean, bank-stamped bands. There was a secondary compartment beneath the cash, filled with gold bullion coins that caught the dim light of the room. I didn't need a calculator to know what I was looking at. This wasn't a few $1,000s. This was a life-changing sum. This was millions. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. My first instinct was to reach for my radio, but then I looked at the map again. I thought about my mounting rent, my mother's medical bills, and the fact that I was one car breakdown from homelessness. I looked at the money, then at the door. No one knew I was in here yet. The guest was gone. "This is your chance, Maya," I whispered to myself. The words felt heavy. "This is the only hand you'll ever be dealt. Are you going to fold or are you going to play?" I stood up, my decision making itself. I didn't call the police. Instead, I walked to my cleaning cart, grabbed a heavy-duty black trash liner, and began to empty the contents of the wall into the bottom of my cart, covering it with a mountain of dirty, used towels. I was no longer just a maid. I was a thief. Or perhaps I was finally a winner. But as I wheeled the cart out, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man who left this behind wasn't the type of person who forgot things. He was the type of person who came back for them. Part 2. The Weight of the Secret. The elevator ride down to the basement housekeeping hub felt eternal. Every chime as we passed to floor made my stomach do a nauseating flip. I was convinced everyone could see the tremor in my hands, that the sheer weight of the millions now concealed beneath a pile of soiled towels was radiating off the cleaning cart like heat from pavement. In the reflection of the polished stainless steel elevator doors, I looked the same. The standard issue beige uniform, the neat bun, the tired eyes. But I felt fundamentally altered. I was no longer Maya, the invisible maid. I was a guardian of an illicit fortune. When the doors slid open in the basement, the familiar smells of industrial detergent and bleach washed over me. I pushed the cart toward the laundry chute, the wheels squeaking a rhythm that sounded like guilty, guilty, guilty. I had to move the money from the cart to something I could take out of the hotel without raising suspicion. My shift didn't end for another 4 hours. I navigated the maze of corridors, heading toward an unused supply closet in a section of the basement that was being renovated. The dust was thick here, the fluorescent bulbs flickering, giving the area a ghostly feel. It was the perfect hiding spot, at least temporarily. I pulled the black plastic liner out from under the heavy, damp towels. The weight of the bag surprised me again. Money, it turns out, is heavy when you have enough of it to change your life. Inside the closet, I stared at the plastic bag. I couldn't just leave it here. If maintenance came by, it would be found. I needed to streamline it. I opened the satchel I'd taken first, the one with the map and the black notebook. My fingers brushed the smooth vellum of the map. The lines were precise, the handwriting in the notebook small and clipped. It spoke of meticulous planning. Who was the man in room 412? He didn't fit the profile of the rowdy businessmen or the affluent tourists. He had been a ghost, and now I was holding his afterlife. I decided to leave the bulk of the cash and the heavy gold coins in the metallic safe. The safe itself was compact enough to fit inside a large commercial detergent drum I found in the corner. I stuffed old rags around it to keep it from rattling, then sealed the lid. I hid the drum behind a stack of insulation bales, marking the specific bale with a tiny X in blue chalk. The notebook and the map, however, I kept with me. They were small enough to tuck into the waistband of my scrubs. They felt hot against my skin. Returning to my routine was the hardest thing I've ever done. For the next 4 hours, I scrubbed toilets and changed sheets, jumping at every noise. When a guest opened their door abruptly, I nearly screamed, convinced it was the man from 412 back for his property. But the day passed without incident. My supervisor, Mrs. Gable, walked past me once, criticizing the way I had stocked the cart, but she didn't notice the slight tremble in my voice when I apologized. Finally, 5 p.m. arrived. I needed a reason to be moving that specific detergent drum. "Hey, Luis," I called out to one of the younger engineering assistants. "Mrs. Gable said this drum in the renovation zone is expired and needs to be taken to the chemical disposal unit in the back alley. Can you help me get it on a dolly?" It was a lie, but a plausible one. Luis loaded the drum onto a heavy-duty dolly, never questioning its contents. He even rolled it all the way to the service exit. I waited until he walked back inside. The back alley was dark. This was it. I rolled the dolly to my beat-up 10-year-old sedan. Transferring the drum to my trunk was an agony of physical exertion. I drove away from the grand Crestview. I didn't go straight home. My landlord was too nosy. I drove to a self-storage facility on the edge of town. Using some of the cash I had prudently slipped out, $500, I rented a small, climate-controlled unit under a fake name, Sarah Jenkins. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the unit, the silence roaring in my ears. The safe was inside the drum was in the unit, and the key was in my pocket. My life as of 1:15 p.m. this afternoon was over. I was rich, yes, but I was also, for the first time in my life, truly afraid. Part 3. The Shadow in the Lobby. The next morning, the sun felt like an interrogator's lamp. I woke up in my cramped apartment, the springs of my mattress groaning as I shifted. For a split second, I forgot. Then, the sight of the orange storage unit key on my nightstand brought it all crashing back. My heart did that familiar, violent skip. I had millions of dollars sitting in a detergent drum 3 miles away, and I had to go back to the scene of the crime. When I walked through the service entrance of the Grand Crestview, the air felt different. I felt like I had TIEF branded on my forehead in neon letters. I went straight to the locker room, head down, focusing on the rhythmic click of my shoes on the linoleum. "Maya, wait up!" I froze. It was Sarah, another housekeeper, a woman who lived for gossip. She caught up to me, breathless. "Did you hear? Management is freaking out. Someone from the penthouse floor reported a missing watch, and now security is doing random locker inspections today. Can you believe the nerve?" The blood drained from my face. My locker. I had tucked the black notebook and the map into the hidden pocket of my spare uniform inside my locker. If they searched it, I was done. Inspections? When? I managed to ask, my voice sounding thin and reedy. "Starting now, I think. They're working their way down from the top. We're probably next." I didn't wait for her to finish. I sprinted toward the lockers. I had 5 minutes, maybe less. I fumbled with my combination, my fingers slick with sweat. Left, right, left. The metal door swung open. I grabbed the spare uniform, felt the stiff vellum of the map inside the lining, and shoved the whole bundle into my laundry bag. Just as I slammed the door shut, the heavy fire door at the end of the hall opened. 2 security guards and Mrs. Gable walked in. "Ladies, step away from your lockers," Mrs. Gable barked. I stood there, clutching my laundry bag like a shield. They went through Sarah's locker first, then they moved to mine. I watched, paralyzed, as they felt the back of the metal box. They found nothing. "What's in the bag, Maya?" one of the guards asked. "Just dirty rags from yesterday," I lied, my throat bone dry. "I forgot to drop them at the chute before I clocked out." He stared at me for a beat too long. Finally, he nodded. "Get it to the laundry, now." I hurried out, but as I passed the main lobby elevators, I saw him. Standing by the concierge desk was a man in a charcoal suit. He was tall, with silvering hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He wasn't yelling, but the way the concierge was trembling told me everything. He was the guest from room 412. He hadn't gone to the airport, or if he had, he'd come back. He turned his head slightly, his eyes scanning the lobby with a predatory slowness. I ducked behind a marble pillar, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I realized then that I wasn't just dealing with a wealthy guest. He was looking for his investment, and I was the last person seen entering his room. Part 4. The Midnight Encounter. The rest of my shift was a blur of terror. I stayed in the service areas, avoiding the main halls, convinced that every shadow was the man in the charcoal suit. When 5 p.m. finally came, I didn't leave through the main exit. I waited until a delivery truck arrived at the loading dock and slipped out behind it, keeping the truck between me and the security cameras. I didn't go to the storage unit. I knew that if he was as professional as he looked, he might be following me. Instead, I drove to a crowded shopping mall, parked my car, and spent 3 hours walking through different stores, checking for a tail. By 10 p.m., I felt reasonably sure I was alone. I drove to a payphone and called the hospital. "How is she?" I asked when the nurse picked up. "Your mother is stable, Maya, but the new treatment is expensive. The billing department was asking about the payment plan." "I'll have the money tomorrow," I said, my voice firm. "All of it. Don't worry about the cost. Just give her the best." Hanging up, the guilt and the fear merged into a cold resolve. I had to get that money out of the city. I drove to the storage unit under the cover of a sudden heavy rainstorm. The facility was deserted. I unlocked the orange door. The smell of the detergent drum hit me, artificial lemon and dust. I knelt down and opened the black notebook one more time. I had been studying the strings of numbers earlier. They weren't just bank codes. They were a timeline. The dates in the notebook ended on today's date. Next to it was a coordinate that pointed to a small private airfield 30 miles north, and a single word: extraction. Suddenly, the motion sensor light outside my unit flickered on. I froze. A shadow stretched across the concrete floor, long and thin. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. "It's a very heavy drum for a woman of your stature to move alone," a voice said. It was smooth, cultured, and terrifyingly calm. I turned slowly. Standing in the doorway was the man from the lobby. The charcoal suit was dry. He'd been waiting for me inside the facility. "You have something of mine, Maya," he said. He knew my name, the map, the codes, and the capital. You see, that money wasn't just found. It was a delivery that you've interrupted. My mind raced. I looked at the heavy drum. "I was going to call the police," I lied. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "No, you weren't. You saw a door open and you walked through it. I respect that. But here is the reality. The people I work for don't like interruptions. However, I have a problem. My extraction is already scheduled, and I am short the necessary documentation you currently hold." He stepped into the unit. "I can kill you and take it, or I can offer you a deal. You give me the notebook and the map, the things that actually matter to my employers, and you keep the cash. Consider it a finder's fee, because carrying that much cash makes you a target. It's a burden. If you keep it, you become a ghost, just like me. Do we have a deal, Maya? Or do I find out how many towels it takes to muffle a scream?" Part 5. The Choice and the Horizon. The engine of my old sedan hummed, a rattling sound that usually filled me with anxiety, but tonight it sounded like a getaway vehicle. I drove through the neon-soaked streets of the city, my eyes darted to the rearview mirror every few seconds. I wasn't just Maya the maid anymore. I was a woman carrying the weight of a ghost's fortune. The storage unit key felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment. If that man from room 412, the man the notebook implied was part of something much larger, came looking, my address was on file. I pulled into a 24-hour diner, the kind of place where the patrons don't ask questions. I slid into a corner booth, the black notebook hidden under a napkin, and needed to understand the map. I spread the vellum out, my fingers tracing the delicate lines. The coordinates didn't lead to a bank or a warehouse. They led to a small, private airstrip and a specific set of nautical markers off the coast of a Caribbean island. This wasn't just a stash of cash. This was a go-bag for a life of permanent disappearance. The millions in the safe were the fuel, and this map was the flight plan. I looked at my hands. They were calloused from years of manual labor. For 25 years, I had played by every rule. I had worked doubles and skipped meals. The system hadn't rewarded me. It had merely allowed me to survive. And now, the universe had dropped a miracle and a curse into my lap. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank balance, $34.12. Then I looked at the notebook where the final entry, initiate, stood like a command. If I went to the police, the money would be seized as evidence. I'd go back to the hotel and wait for the man from 412 to find out who cleaned his room that day. Or I could follow the map. I left the diner and drove to the hospital where my mother was staying. I sat by her bed, listening to the steady beep of the monitors. I whispered to her, telling her that things were going to be different now, that she was going to get the best specialists, and that we were going on a long, long vacation to a place where the sun always shined. I didn't tell her where the money came from. I told her it was a miracle. By dawn, I had made my move. I returned to the storage unit one last time. I didn't take the heavy detergent drum. Instead, I transferred the cash into two nondescript duffel bags. I kept the gold coins in the original leather satchel. I left the empty safe and the drum in the unit, a hollow shell of my old life. I drove to the airport, the smaller, private terminal indicated by the notebook's secondary coordinates. My heart was a drum, beating a frantic rhythm. I used a portion of the cash to charter a private flight, paying a premium for a pilot who didn't care about a manifest. It was the first time I had ever stepped on a private plane. The leather seats felt like a different world. As the plane lifted off, the city began to shrink. The grand Crestview Hotel became a tiny dot, then disappeared altogether. I looked down at the duffel bags at my feet. Millions of dollars. A map to a new identity. A notebook that held the secrets of a man who would likely never be found. I felt a strange sense of peace. The fear was still there, but it was eclipsed by a fierce, newfound strength. I was Maya, and I had reclaimed my life from the walls of a room that was meant to keep me invisible. I was no longer cleaning up after other people's lives. I was finally starting my own. The horizon was glowing with the first light of a new day. I leaned back in the seat, closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I didn't worry about the clock. I was free.